Hi, everybody. Welcome to our second admitted student panel with three new panelists who are current students at Willamette. I am Leah Straley. I'm the Assistant Dean of Recruitment at Willamette. Welcome to this panel. And for all of you who have tuned in before, it's nice to see you again. I would like to introduce Jordan and Jessica, who also work in the admissions office. So there they are waving at you guys. You have probably had some interaction with them along the way. And before we get started, I want to let everyone know that this is being recorded and we will be sharing this on our admitted student Facebook page, and it will be emailed out to other admitted students. If you have a question, please feel free to type it into the chat at the bottom, and we will get to those questions throughout the panel today. Also, if you would like to raise your hand, there's a raise your hand function. If you click on that, then I will be able to unmute your microphone, and then you can ask that question. I think that is it. At this time, I am going to have the three panelists do a short introduction of themselves. So our panelists are Olivia, Bruce, and Becky, and all of them will give a short introduction of themselves. And then we'll go into a few of the questions that we have received, and then it will be open for you guys to ask other questions. So Olivia, why don't you begin and do a short introduction of yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Olivia Corrigan. I am a 1L at Willamette. I am originally from Portland, and I went to high school overseas in Indonesia. Came back here to Oregon, and I did my undergrad at U of O, studying political science and econ with minors in business and communications as well. My involvement at Willamette so far has just been classes. As I said, I'm in my first year, but I'm very excited. I had the opportunity to be on law review and potentially moot court, but mostly law review in the future.
All right, thank you. Bruce, why don't you go ahead and do a short introduction?
Yeah, sure thing. So my name is Bruce Garrett. I'm a 2L at Willamette, and I started law school in August of 2018, transitioning into a second career. I had worked previously for the federal government for about 9 years before that. So I'm kind of like a second career type person, and which has been really great. I've really enjoyed my time at Willamette, sort of treating it like a job. And I'm involved in a few different organizations, moot courts. I'm on the moot court board, and I am the recently elected note and comment editor at the Willamette Law Review. So pretty soon, actually, we will be drafting up our invitation for students for 1Ls to come onto the Willamette Law Review. So that's right around the corner, something that I'm pretty involved in at this time. But also at Willamette, I've also been a part of another online journal, Willamette Online, and I clerked for Supreme Court Justice Adrian Nelson last year as well. So try to get my hands in as many different things as I can on campus.
Excellent, thank you. Becky.
Hi, I'm Becky Hillstrom. I'm also a 2L. Yeah, I'm almost kind of like a 2.5L. I started part-time, so yeah. So after Friday, I'll be like a 2.5L. But it will still take me a while to finish. No, I'm sorry. I'll just be a 2L. Sorry. So myself, I'm also a second career person. My first career was in second language education. So I taught Arabic and Spanish. Most recently, I was working at a bilingual elementary school. I live in Corvallis, so here in Corvallis. And I have 3 kids, so I have opted not to be really involved at Willamette, just so that I can balance my family along with school. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, well, thank you. We had a couple of questions that were emailed into us, so I would like to start with those questions. Uh, the first one is specifically to Becky. And how do you feel you have found community at Willamette? As a mother and as a person who started law school outside of the traditional window, do you feel like you have had a different experience than other law students? And this is coming from an admitted student who is a single father and is over the traditional age of law students.
Yeah, I feel that while I am older than a lot of the people in my classes, I feel like I'm not over and beyond. I feel like well, just like Bruce, there's lots of people that are second career type of people. There's quite a few people that aren't just the average straight out of college student, and there's a lot of parents too, including a lot of single parents. And so I'm not a single parent, but I have met a lot of single parents. There's a group, parents at Willamette group that I have. I tapped into it a little bit last year when I was trying to find a place to watch my kids in the evening when I had an event or something I needed to go to. And so there is a support system for parents, and Willamette is amazingly family friendly. I have seen people that had to bring their kids to class every so often. You have to get permission from the professors, but if your child is well behaved, they've been very open. I've had to bring a kid to class a couple of times, and my professors have been very open, very supportive. Yeah, and very willing to work with your schedule, and they recognize that that you that kids require they don't always want to fit into your schedule, and they won't sometimes. In fact, my first year, I had an appointment with my writing professor, and I had to bring my son, who was 5 at the time, and he melted down during the meeting, and I was humiliated. And with all of my university experience previous, I feel like my other professors would have been very offended and feeling like I was disrespecting their time. But my professor was so nice and so understanding about it. So I really feel like I love Willamette. I feel very supported.
Awesome, thank you. And Bruce, thank you for putting the link up there for the group for parents. Let's see, we have another question, and this one specifically to Bruce. Do you think attending Willamette is the reason you got your externship with Honorable Adrienne Nelson? And then to everybody else, do you think that Willamette's proximity to the Supreme Court and to the Capitol in general provides opportunities that aren't available at other law schools?
I don't think it is the reason why I got the externship. There are students from the other 2 schools in Oregon that do have externships with the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals. But did it make it a heck of a lot easier to sort of manage my schedule and get to and from the court? Yeah. And so having access to the Supreme Court, which, well, by the time you're enrolled and going, we'll be back. It's actually temporarily located across town, but normally it's a short walk away, just across the street. Yeah, it was easy for me to go back and forth. In fact, I did. I would get out of class, go over to the court, and sometimes come back for a study session or for another class. So I don't think it was the reason why I got the externship, but it definitely made it a lot more manageable for me to get to class and do other obligations. I do know that folks that were going to the other schools, they kind of had to carve the whole day out. When you talk about transportation, getting down to Salem, getting their hours in and going back, it was sort of a whole day ordeal. So the location is a huge plus. and I was yes, very lucky to have just that short walk.
All right, thank you. Olivia or Becky, would you like to chime in on the proximity of Willamette to the courts and to the Capitol building and the opportunities that that provides?
I will. I know multiple people who work with the legislature or have externed for the judges, and I know that they do a lunch every year with the Supreme Court justices. It's an invite lunch, but I got to go last year and I got to sit with Justice Nelson, and she was amazing. I feel, and like Judge Ortega, she does a debriefing almost every week at Willamette. And I know she's not a Supreme Court justice, but I do feel like people, legislators as well. I've talked to legislators while I was walking to my car in the parking lot. So I just feel like it's a good place to rub shoulders with people.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to move on to, I don't think we have any questions in the chat, so I'm going to move on to a question that is usually on the minds of first time law students. For all of the panelists, what study methods have really helped you become successful in law school?
You want me to start? Okay. Are you still there? I think I might have lost my audio. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. Sorry, just a delay. You know, I've tinkered around with some of the study methods that worked. And to be honest, I don't think anybody shows up in the first day and sort of figures it out, or even in the first semester necessarily. It's kind of a constant process of figuring out what works. And I think one of the methods that works the best is to be adaptive and kind of know your class and know your professor and know what works for you and what doesn't. That's not a very solid answer. It's like, how am I going to translate that? But to be aware, like, you know, to find out how you retain information, what helps you learn. And then most importantly, or maybe not most importantly, but very importantly, how you can apply that to the exam at the end of the semester. So for instance, one of the things that really helps me, and I try to do it when all possible, is to do review throughout the semester. I think that's absolutely critical for me to being ready to take the exam. You do have a little bit of time during finals to go back and refresh, but I mean, I can't tell you how important it is to keep going over the materials, keep reviewing your notes from earlier in the semester through a continuous process, because if it's a couple of days before the test and you might have 10 or 15 things where you're like, this doesn't make sense, and it's kind of too late at that point. So I think that's one of the ways how law school really is a lot different than undergrad, where in undergrad, the volume of material is less. The volume in law school is insane, but also the difficulty. It can be pretty difficult and dense stuff to kind of wrap your mind around. And going through the distilling process and trying to understand it and make it, you know, how you can apply these quick rules on the exam requires kind of a revisiting. So for me, that's the number one thing, is to go back, review, and ask questions throughout the semester. And that's worked the best for me so far.
I will just echo what Bruce said and add just a little bit. I think the most important thing, or one of the things I think that separates my performance, is like reading the cases. I think doing the assigned reading, some people think that you can like skip out on that in some cases. And I think at least until you figure out how to read a case and what like your professor wants you to kind of get from a specific reading, it just, for me, was a flat out rule that first semester I did every single reading. And that definitely didn't hurt me at all. Yes, it takes a lot of time, but I think that is a really, really important thing to do. And then especially keeping your notes organized and doing the review throughout the semester is really helpful. Not just reviewing your notes and the readings, but also doing practice problems, whether those are from your professors or other online resources. That's really, really important. And then I guess one other thing is just being willing, at least open-minded, to having different study methods for different classes, for different professors. I thought that if I figured out one study method that would work, then I would be good to go. That was very wrong. I would say I have a different study method for every class, and that's kind of half the battle, is figuring out how that works for you and how that meets what the teacher is expecting from you.
To add also, one thing that I feel like has been really helpful to figure out how to study for each class, because they are different, is to talk to people that had your teacher before, that are a year in front of you or 2 years in front of you. Because, I mean, just for example, when I took constitutional law, it was so different than all the other classes I had ever taken, and I couldn't figure out what my teacher wanted me to know until I talked to someone who had had him the year before, and she said, oh yeah, you just have to, the case is the law, so you just have to memorize basically what the case is about. And then it was like, oh, okay. So people are your resource.
Thank you. Lauren has asked a question of Olivia. Do you have any suggestions on how to get involved your first year of school without overextending yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the best way to do it is to take advantage of all of the things that Willamette will do for you. Every week they're sending out emails that come from different individuals within like student programs or from the career placement office. So there's just so much that comes to you without having to do anything, to really just pay attention to that. I think one of the great examples is the attorney mentor program. That doesn't necessarily directly get you involved with things at school, but it connects you with someone who can help you figure out what connections you want to make, or maybe give you input about what involvement they had in law school or what they wish they did differently in law school and that sort of thing. And another thing that kind of stems from that is we host events at school all the time. So this summer I am externing at the tax court, and the only reason I knew about that externship was because I went to one of the lunches where the staff so 2 judges, the staff attorney and the current clerk for one of the judges, came to lunch, and they gave us food and sat in a room with us for an hour and talked about what they love about their job and what they wish they knew in law school. So touching kind of, I think, on the proximity question from earlier, is just there's so many resources that are available that make it easy to get involved without feeling like you're spending hours every week trying to get involved. So yeah, just take advantage of everything that is offered, and don't be afraid to talk to people and kind of put yourself out there. It is uncomfortable, and sometimes, at least for me, I felt like I had no idea what I was talking about. Even when I went to the tax court lunch, I was like, what is it? What is a tax court? And why do we have one? So that was, I think, a little just great to hear what people do and what they love about their job, and just not being afraid to ask questions. Yeah, I think that's everything.
Great, thank you. Lauren had also asked, what is a practice problem? And Olivia, I think you mentioned that in a few sentences. And how long can a case be? How long would reading be for preparation for a class? And any of you can chime in, but Olivia, if you want to answer the practice problem question.
Sure. So it will depend on each class, but generally you get kind of a paragraph of facts or some concepts. So I guess the best way to explain the practice problem is just finding a way to apply these kind of weird concepts that you get from the reading. There are a lot of practice problems in the case books that are part of the assigned readings, and some of them are as simple as like a one sentence response on what this case said about this concept or what this person tried to argue, and some of them are more complex and kind of walk through a whole section of the course syllabus. So they're short and they can also be really long, but it basically is just getting you to kind of think through the process of what it would be like to sit for an exam without having it be a 3-hour experience where you're panic writing for ever. So yeah, there's a lot of my favorite kind of resources, examples and explanation books, which the library has. We have online access to them. And there's basically all these supplemental books and online resources where you can get a ton of practice problems and just find the ones that you want to work through or that you think you should work through before kind of moving on. And
I think that,
go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Because this is a really good question about how long a case can be and the amount of reading, because you always hear in law school that there is a ton of reading. And so I asked my wife, she's an attorney, she went to law school. I said, well, how much reading? Like, give me a number of pages. And she's like, I don't know, 45 to 50 pages a day for all the classes. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's not so bad. And that's actually about right. I think I kind of calculated it out. It's usually about 15 pages per class, maybe a little bit more than that. But it's a lot different, and because it's hard, it's really dense stuff, and a lot of it's new. A lot of folks don't have a lot of experience reading cases coming into law school. So, reading for class sometimes can take 2 to 3 hours when you start out to get through those things, and you have to go back and kind of reread things and try to figure it out. So I really appreciate that question, because that's one thing that I was kind of wondering too before heading into it. And another thing with this type of reading too is it's exhausting, and it's not something you want to do before bed. I think I've tried that in the past to maybe do reading, like you would leisurely before you go to bed, but actually it gets your like mind racing, and I have a hard time falling asleep with it. So it is intense, but it's something where it's a skill, and learning how to read cases or read legal text, you'll become very proficient at it in short order. I believe, if you take it serious in the first semester, by the second semester, you'll be a lot better. And then it just kind of grows and grows, where you get a lot better at it. And you know what to read and what to look for, which is something that really only comes with experience. So that's a great question. It's a lot of reading, but not necessarily by volume. So if you get an assignment and it's 20 pages, that might seem like a lot, but maybe that's an easier one. You might have 7 pages that might take a couple hours, honestly. It just kind of depends. But the reading is a real thing. It's there, and it's not bad, but it is a commitment.
Great, thank you. I have a question for the panelists. I don't think we have any other questions in the chat. I am wondering why each of you chose Willamette.
I can start with this one. I kind of started with the approach of where I want to live and practice in the future. I know that I want to be in the Pacific Northwest generally, and Oregon specifically, at least for right now. My family lives here. I live in Portland, and I commute to Salem when we have school that's not online. So I think paying attention to where you want to be in the long run is really important, because you're making connections with people in the community. And not to say that if you go somewhere else and then move, it's going to be bad, but I think of it more as like you have a 3-year advantage to make connections with other students who are going to be, at least some of them, your colleagues and maybe opposing counsel. And so it's really the connection and location piece that's important to me. And then I think the other part is I visited a lot of schools on the East Coast because I thought that I wanted to be on the East Coast. And I think it's really important to kind of get like the vibe of a school. One incident I think is like there's a great comparison. This school on the East Coast, I visited and went on a tour, which included like a literal tour of the school, and then I sat in on a class. And the vibe that I got, it was probably like a 200 or 300% lecture, and not one person, not even the professor, like said hi or recognized that I was there. So it didn't really feel a welcoming environment, and I wasn't expecting everyone to turn around and like wave at me, but it just felt very tense and competitive. And then the other part of it was the tour. They went by their equivalent of like their career office, and the tour guide quite literally said, "This is our career placement office. I think some people come here to get their resumes edited," and that was it. So I think really just paying attention to where you want to be location wise, and then what the school is going to offer you. Those were things that really drew me to Willamette. Perfect location for me. The fact that we're so close to the Capitol and Supreme Court, and really just like the center of everything in Salem, is really awesome. And it's also just the feeling that I got when I was walking around the school, attending different events. Everyone was very friendly, willing to answer questions, and it just kind of felt like the place where I wanted to be to go to law school, because it isn't so much so the competitive, super cold environment. It's I hate to be so corny, but it's like a big family where like people help each other out, and there's so many resources. And so the community aspect of it is what sold me, definitely.
I'll echo that. And in events that I've gone to with other Oregon law schools, they've commented, the other students have commented on how Willamette students seem to be more friendly with each other and helping each other as opposed to competing with each other, which is something I really like, but found out after the fact it wasn't why I chose Willamette exactly. But why I chose Willamette is because it's close to my house. I took the LSAT at Willamette, and I just really liked how it was small and it felt very community. It felt like everyone knew each other. And then in talking to the admissions people, I could just tell that it was really family friendly, which was obviously really important to me, because I don't want law school. I don't want to go to law school at the detriment of my family. So that was really important to me and what drew me to Willamette.
I think Olivia mentioned earlier about the proximity, and Becky, you were done, right? I know there's a delay here. I didn't want to cut you off. Okay. I had a few options looking around, and I wanted to stay in the Northwest. And I think, as Olivia mentioned, that's really important. I think if you do want to be in the Northwest, you want to be in Portland, especially, or Oregon or Salem. It's important, I think, to go to law school in the Northwest, because you meet all these people throughout the course of your law school career, going to different events, having externships, internships. So naturally, when you're done with school, or even for your summers, you're going to be close to where you met all these folks, and that's really important. But also, and the panelists already make good points about Willamette. I don't think oftentimes does not fit the stereotype of how law schools can be like unnecessarily competitive, or people can be sort of stuck up, or have all that kind of negative association that sometimes I think is associated with law school. It really, in my experience, has not been the case at Willamette, and that was one of the things that I, had heard about it going into it. I talked to a couple alum before I enrolled at Willamette, and that was I found that to be true, and that's a really I think that's a really important thing. Is if you haven't already, if you go out and meet, and you will, I'm sure through various events, meet students that go to other law schools, if you can kind of get a sense of that, where that's something that's not one of the pleasant experiences about law school, but that's not the case really at Willamette. I really haven't found that to be the case. And I think that's something that you can't necessarily just get anywhere. So it's a great characteristics and one of the things I love about going to school there.
I would just add on that one thing that really resonated with me is when you're in kind of the between, like after admissions and sort of making your decision, it seems like, at least to me, it felt like there were so many kind of promises and big picture assertions about what this school stands for, what our community is like, and that happens for every law school. But every single thing that I heard about Willamette from visiting and talking with students or professors or the admissions team, everything has been exactly as people said that it would be, and it has continued throughout my entire first year. So I think there was a little bit of hesitation on my part, like, okay, well, they say this, is this really going to be how it is? And it absolutely has been more than I expected. So I think there's a lot of value in being able to not only see what the values are, but also just know that they continue throughout all of first year, and I'm assuming into second and third. So it isn't necessarily something that we just would like get you into the school and then forget about it. It absolutely is part of like my everyday experience. Every interaction that I have is the community, and all the things that I really loved about Willamette when I was in the decision-making process have remained the same. So I think that's really great. And then Becky asked in the chat how commute has impacted my experience in law school. I think it definitely does impact my experience. I think everybody's personal situations at home, this is where they live, will impact their law school experience. For me, I felt like finding it would be a great decision to be in Portland, which is where my parents live. So I live with my parents, and I thought, if I hate the commute, then I'll just move down to Salem. And I would say the biggest impact that it's had is just in making me very efficient. I have a schedule and I have to stick to it. So I think it's been a positive impact in that I don't really have time to waste. I know when I need to leave to hit traffic and when I need to leave to avoid traffic. So it really has just given it a lot of structure. And as for, I think, kind of outside the academic realm, as far as like socially how it's impacted me, obviously I don't live in Salem, so I'm not there on the weekends. I'm not there at night. And I thought that would really impact my social experience in terms of making friends and doing this study group thing. And obviously it has, but not in a negative way at all. I think you just have to learn how to adapt. If there are things that I want to stay the night for in Salem, then I'll stay with a friend or get a hotel. So it's really just, I think, given me a lot of structure. And the time for studying question, I think obviously it's 2 hours of my day. But I think the way that I kind of justify it and think about it is that time I can use for other things. So I'll like call my grandparents or listen to a lecture. We have access to apps that you can listen to, like a 45 or an hour lecture about a property. You can listen to different Supreme Court oral arguments about a case that you're going to read in class the next day. So there's just a lot of ways to kind of maximize that time. So it definitely takes a chunk out of my day, but I find it worth it just because I love living at home with my parents, and I find ways to kind of make up for that time.
Can I chime in on that too? And I guess I'm just going to echo, but so I have a commute. My commute's like 50 minutes. And I listen to the lectures that Olivia was talking about every day. And I feel like because of that, I don't have to review as much as other people do, because I'm keeping the concepts fresh, and they're really actually sinking in. And so I actually feel like it's been kind of a blessing, because I don't know that I would have used that time to review had I lived in Salem.
I think one other thing is, this may be like a super nerdy thing that I do, but I have a recorder, like a voice audio recorder. So like near finals last term, obviously we're in a different situation right now, so I didn't do it. But I can record myself reading my outline out loud, reading different like paragraphs or like whatever it is, and playing that while I'm driving. Obviously, you don't want to be like reading an outline while you're driving, but hearing that, and even just like talking yourself through a concept, I probably look crazy if like someone drives by me and I'm just like talking to myself. But that's been a great thing to do in the preparation, and then just like hearing that on repeat. I get sick of my own voice, but I get the concepts down.
And I'll add on to that. So I live in Southeast Portland. I guess all three of us commute. But I had a really lucky situation, and I would look into it if you are going to live in Portland, because I joined a van pool with a handful of workers that employees of the legislator, which is just across the street. So I hop on a van that's just about a 15-minute walk from my house, and then ride down to Salem, and then walk from the Capitol. And I get on campus at 8:30 every day, and I leave at 5:15. So it's like a job. And they work different ways, but my van, I'd have to drive about once a week. So 4 days a week, I would do a lot of my reading in the van itself, because I'm just a passenger. So, and then the days that I did have to drive, like the other panelists said, I would record myself and play it back. I would listen to audio from some of the sources from the library, the Barbary videos about the particular subject. So if you are in Portland, if you want to be in Portland, or if you're in Eugene, I know some people are down there too, look into the carpooling, either with other students or the official ride share through the state. It was a lifesaver for me. And I don't know, I mean, I could have done it the other way, but it was just really nice because I didn't lose that much commute time at all, or that many hours in commute. In fact, I was able to get a lot of my work done in the van. And to ask the question about, I think there was a question about, are the classes recorded? Not by default. I know that some schools do that. I think there are various reasons why that's not the default. For some professors, I think because they want people to speak freely in class and not have to worry about them being recorded. But I will tell you, with having to transition to Zoom to do classes, that a lot of the audio is now available. It's been really helpful for me to go back and re-listen. And I think that some of the professors are opening up to the idea of doing that, of having an audio or perhaps even a video clip of the class online. But I don't think that's the default right now. But that might change after the professors see how students are responding to that. And that's something I put in all the evaluations at the end of this semester, that I really appreciated having the recordings available to go back and pick up on things that I missed. So yeah, just to recap, the commute is not undoable. And in fact, if you're up in Portland for events, meeting with attorneys or something, it's kind of nice because you're already home. Sort of like the opposite problem that a lot of folks have in Salem, but it works out either way. Lots of people do the commute from north, south, east, or west, and it's not unbearable. It's all about managing your time and figuring out how to make it work.
Great, thank you. I have a question about faculty support. So for all of the panelists, how has your interaction with faculty been, and how have you felt supported, or have there been times when you haven't felt supported by your faculty members?
This has been, I think, one of the best things about my first year so far, and one of the reasons, as I was saying, that I was attracted to Willamette and why that's kind of remained true is the fourth floor of our building, which is where all the faculty offices and dean's offices are. Any given day, when we're not in like Willamette University online, you can walk up to the 4th floor. And I think almost every single time I walked up there, my professors were in their office, door open, ready and willing to talk about anything, whether it be related to their class, law school, or nothing legal related like at all. So I think that's one of the best things is the faculty is so accessible in person and also online. Professors are so quick to respond, at least the ones that I've had. I know not all of them are as quick, but for the most part, I will get a response from a professor, whether it's a request to set up an appointment, a question about a reading or anything. They respond, if not within the hour, in 3 or 4. So I think the accessibility has been a huge advantage, at least for me. I think even with this transition that we've made to online, professors have been so great and just as accessible, if not more. I stopped going to school before we officially went online just because I have some conditions where my immune system is really compromised. So since the beginning of this COVID situation, I've been doing online, and I approached different professors and gave the little recording device that I was talking about earlier to a friend who was in my section and took my recorder to every single class for those weeks that I wasn't there. Obviously, I had to get permission from each professor, but they were like, you know, whatever you need to do, we're here to support you. So that was really great. And now, I mean, I took a contracts exam, my final last week, and my study group over the weekend, we were panicking with all these questions. And we were like, man, it would be so great if we could go to office hours and just talk in person to our professor. And we emailed him and he set up a Zoom appointment, like Zoom office hours on a Sunday afternoon. And he spent an hour with us talking about contracts, laughing about different, you know, like things that have happened over, I mean, it was office hour structure, but it was also just a great way to catch up with other people that don't live in the same house as you. So the accessibility is incredible. And I think that is the same for, I mean, I know all of my friends say the same thing. It's a shared experience. And it's something that I really, really value and am thankful for.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think the access to the faculty, whether that be professors or the deans or the library staff with research professor or just staff that run the library, including the students, it's one of those things where you don't want to be shy. And I know some people tend to be sort of reserved and don't want to ask for help, but there are a lot of resources and benefits there, and people are responsive if you just ask for assistance. So with professors, I usually either go during the office hours, or I'll send an email asking a question. I'll ask them, is it okay if I email you a substantive question where we can exchange it via email? Do you prefer to do it over the phone or in person? And you kind of work it out. And I think that what you'll find is that the professors are just like any other person. Some people, you really vibe with them, and sometimes you don't. And it's not because they're necessarily bad. It's because personalities are different, or maybe they're not as outgoing, perhaps, as you are, or something like that. But nobody, every professor has office hours, or they will set up with an appointment to meet with you. And I found that really helpful. But I also found it really helpful to work with, especially for the writing assignments, to work with Mary Rumsey in the library. She is the research professor who helped me enormously figure out how to kind of dig deep on these research topics and figure out things. And it's not necessarily something that's going to be advertised there for you every day, nor is she going to call you or send you an email and ask you if you want to come get help. You kind of have to seek it out yourself. And that goes also with other students and having people kind of bounce ideas off of people. So it is one of those things, like the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. But the resources in terms of person to person, faculty, it is endless, and it goes all the way up to the dean. At least that's my experience, and it's really been helpful for me.
I just want to mention too, I can't remember the exact name of the office, but it's like the career development office or something where Marty and Phyllis are. They're so awesome. They really have your back. They will help you they'll do everything they can to help you find a job and to get prepped to find a job. And they're also just really, really supportive. They're attorneys, and so they know exactly what we're going through. And I personally haven't burst into tears at law school where I needed to duck in and hide somewhere. But my friends that have, that's where they go, is they duck into Marty's office and cry until they can get it together and go back to class. So they're really supportive and great as well.
All right, we've had a couple of questions about law review and what is it like to be on law review. So for those involved, can you give a little bit of information about that? And Bruce, perhaps, what is the process that you're involved in right now for 1Ls who would like to be on law review?
Sure. So law review is something, it's for the second and third year. And the law review is an academic journal that it's very prestigious. We publish a lot of scholarly work 3 times a year is an actual like paper journal. I think I maybe have one back there, but actually most of it's online like anything else these days. So we have 3 publications a year. In terms of student involvement, like I said, so it is for 2Ls and 3Ls. The second year, most primarily you're doing what we call cite and source editing. So you're editing the citations that are part of the articles, but also doing substantive legal edits to the text and making sure that they flow properly, that they're supported by authority, and that they're factually accurate. So as part of that process of being the 2L staff and working on the law review, you actually make your writing skills, you improve a lot even from the first year by kind of being on that back end where you're doing some of the editing. In terms of writing, law students don't write the articles themselves, but they do write, you can write what we call a note or a comment. And so at the law review, I am the note and the comment editor, and we get submissions from students. And this is like, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on this, but a note and a comment is basically a student work. You either write an original idea on the law, that's a note, or a comment, which is a commentary on a case or somebody else's legal writing. They tend to be a lot shorter and have different parameters than the articles, which come usually from lawyers, professors, academics, and so forth. But there are writing opportunities. We're trying to expand next year to get an online student publication for the law review, because getting published on the law review is really hard, to be honest. You know, you're competing with, for instance, last year we had former Chief Justice Nunez write an article, and you know, even if you're a really good writer as part of, you know, at the law school, it's hard to compete with people like that who have dedicated decades to legal writing. So it's competitive, to be honest, and it's hard to get your work published as a student, but not impossible. But if we get this online thing going, which we're trying to do, then we'll have like an online bank, perhaps, where you can publish, even though it's not a main part of the journal, but an offshoot. And then just real quick, I'll mention how you get onto law review. So the process this year is a little bit different, but I'll just kind of tell you how it normally works. We send out an invitation at the end of your first year. The invitations go to those who are ranked in the top third of the journal, or those who are, in the top third of their class, or the top 50% of their class who have a B+ or better in their legal research and writing class. And it's an imperfect system, but really what it is weeding. We want to make sure that students are serious, dedicated to the work, or they have the other option of a really good writer maybe didn't do as well in the other classes. But that's not enough by itself just to be in those places, to be in the top third or the top half. In fact, here in about a week, I'm going to send out an email to those who to the whole school and tell them what the process is like. In June, we're going to send out a fact pattern and some problems, and they're going to have to work through this. It's pretty intense, a lot of work, but we get those submissions back from those who received the invitation, and then we'll go through those, score them and decide who we want to bring on to the journal. So it's competitive, but it is a really good experience to go through the editing process, to write for the law review, and it looks great on your resume too. But just I'd say the intrinsic factors there are worth a lot. Law review is a great thing if you can do it. If you can't, there are other journals at the law school that you can participate in. But I highly encourage you to participate in law review if you can.
Alrighty, thank you. Olivia, do you want to chime in on that?
No, I have nothing to say about law review yet, except for that I hope to get an invitation. But I was going to say in the chat, I can't really speak to the first part of your question, Lauren, because I haven't reached my summer yet. But the summer before law school, I think the best thing to do for me, I spent a year between undergrad and law school. I worked at an immigration and business law firm in Portland. I stopped working there at the end of June. So I took a couple months off, I think almost 2 months off before starting school. So I think one really great thing to do is just try and relax as much as you can and get things in your life organized, whether that's like literally your study space at home or setting up schedules for childcare and those sorts of things that you just want locked in before you start school would be a really great way to spend your time. I think just relax and don't do a deep dive into any like legal anything really. I think the one thing that my professors all said, even talking to us between fall semester and spring semester, there were a couple students that kept asking, like, what can I do over the break to improve and all these things. And every single professor was like, literally do nothing. Don't do a thing. Read for pleasure, and that's about it. Yeah.
I think if there was a skill though that I going back in time, I did not do this, but I was out of school for a long time before I started law school, and I was rusty at writing. I wasn't used to sitting in front of my computer, and so consequently I was really slow. And I think if I would have known that the summer before law school, I probably would have just made myself do some writing exercises just to get my writing juices flowing, not necessarily legal, but just to take my thoughts and get them on paper and just practice doing that. Because you'll be writing, the first year you'll be writing a lot for your writing class. And also every single exam, which I saw in the chat earlier, basically, if your class is not a writing class, then your entire grade is based on your final exam. And a good portion of the final exams are essays. So being quick, being able to put your thoughts down on paper in a cohesive, well thought out way, and to be able to do that quickly really pays off in the exams as well. So I just think that's a skill that really could I go back in time, I would have done that.
All right, thank you. One final question before we end, and this one might be a tough one for the panelists, or it might be really easy. I'm wondering if there has been something that was very surprising or very unexpected about law school that you have experienced so far.
That's a great question. And one of the crazy things about this, and then keep it in mind when you start law school, is this is such a tough thing. Law is tough, and it's tough for people that are been practicing for a really long time, which is hard. It's a hard subject, which is good. It's what you want. It's very challenging and rewarding, but you forget that, like, just a year and a half ago, for instance, for me, when I started, I didn't know anything about the law at all. And that's something to keep in mind. That's nice. It's like, wow, you learn so much and you look back to where you were, like your first day of law school, and if you think about it that way, it's like, wow, I have acquired a lot of information and a lot of stuff that is secondary, you know, and it kind of changes the way that you sort of think about problems and analyzing situations and thinking about the world even, and you start to kind of to see these pieces out there in the real world differently. And so I think somebody told me that would happen, and I was like, yeah, I think you're, you know, that sounds like an exaggeration, but it's true. I think if you really, especially if you do a deep dive and really get into it, you just start seeing things differently and thinking about the world in a different way, and it's really cool.
I think one of the surprising things for me, I think law school is very tough. I'm sure all of you know that. And so I think kind of realistically, in the beginning, I thought, okay, if I just make it through these first couple weeks, I'm going to know what works for me, and I'm just going to have it all figured out. We're going to be locked in. It's going to be fine. And to a certain extent, that was true. But I think the surprising thing for me was that it is a roller coaster in every way. For some things, it'll be really hard in the beginning, and then it will change. So I think if I could kind of go back and tell myself one thing before I started, was that there will be ups and downs throughout the semester, throughout the year, and some things will come easily to you and not to others, and vice versa. So I think being prepared for that, and just know that it isn't abnormal to, you know, think that the hardest part is week 8 instead of week 1. And then I think another thing for me that was surprising was how different I think my study habits were from my classmates. I think that was one thing that kind of induced a little bit of panic, was that, you know, how one thing I kept asking myself was, well, if we're supposed to all know the same thing, how can my study methods be so different from someone else's? So just kind of being aware that you will do things differently than other people, and you will do things the same as other people. So just kind of, I guess the moral of the story is just keeping everything in perspective and knowing that there are going to be things that are surprising that will come up no matter what, and just be willing to tackle those and see what happens.
I was, number one, really surprised that your entire grade was the final exam. That I didn't know that was the case going in. And the first year they do practice exams. They call them midterms, but they don't count towards your grade. It's just so you can practice taking a law exam. And I've always done really, really well in school. And I did horrible on my midterm exams, and it shocked me like crazy. But it was really good because it showed me where I was deficient. It showed me what I needed to do, and I figured it out for the finals. And I did really well on the final exams, but doing really poorly on those midterm exams, it was a big surprise.
We are out of time, and I would like to thank our panelists for being here for this hour, especially during finals. So thank you, panelists, for showing up and being honest with all of our admitted students. I think it is very helpful. If you didn't get your question answered, or you have more questions, please feel free to email the admissions office. And as I said before, this recording will be available. So if you would like to watch it again, or if our admitted students were unable to tune in, we will post that. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we will see you around. Bye.